June 1944. American forces landed on Saipan in the Mariana Islands. This was a critical defensive line for Japan. If Mariana fell, American B-29 bombers could directly attack Japanese territory for the first time in the war. Tokyo itself would be within range. The loss of these islands would sever Japan's vital supply lines to Southeast Asia, cutting off access to oil, rubber, and other strategic resources essential for continuing the war. The Japanese Navy deployed Operation A-Go, concentrating all remaining carrier forces for a decisive battle. This was Japan's last chance to stop American advances in the Pacific. Shokaku was one of 9 carriers mobilized, along with 5 battleships and 34 cruisers and destroyers. The Japanese fleet represented nearly everything Japan had left after 2.5 years of brutal attrition warfare. Shokaku, a Shokaku-class aircraft carrier. Launched in 1939, completed in August 1941. Full displacement, 32,105 tons, length 257.5 meters, maximum speed 34.2 knots. Carried 72 combat aircraft. At the time of completion, Shokaku was one of the most advanced aircraft carriers in the world, featuring improved armor protection, better damage control systems, and superior aircraft handling facilities compared to earlier Japanese carriers. From December 1941 to June 1944, the ship participated in 7 major campaigns: Pearl Harbor, Indian Ocean raids, Coral Sea, Eastern Solomons, Santa Cruz, and operations around Guadalcanal. At Pearl Harbor, Shokaku's aircraft helped destroy Battleship Row and damaged numerous American vessels. At Coral Sea in May 1942, she was hit by 3 1,000-pound bombs from USS Yorktown dive bombers, suffering significant damage but managing to return to Japan for repairs. At Santa Cruz in October 1942, she took at least 3 more bomb hits, but again survived. The ship had proven remarkably resilient, earning a reputation as unsinkable among her crew. In June 1944, Shokaku belonged to Carrier Division 1, Carrier Force A, under Admiral Ozawa Jisaburo. She sailed alongside her sister ship Zuikaku and the new armored carrier Taiho. These 3 ships formed the core of Japan's remaining carrier striking power. The Americans had 15 carriers, 7 battleships, 58 cruisers and destroyers, complete superiority in numbers and pilot quality. More critically, American pilots averaged over 300 flight hours before their first combat mission. Japanese pilots now averaged fewer than 100 hours. Admiral Ozawa knew his forces were weaker, but hoped to exploit the longer range of Japanese aircraft. Japanese planes could attack from 300 nautical miles, American planes only 200 nautical miles. The plan, Japanese aircraft attack, then land at Guam airfields to refuel and rearm, attack again on return journey. This shuttle bombing strategy would theoretically double Japan's striking power. Additionally, Ozawa planned to supplement carrier aircraft with land-based planes from Guam, Tinian, and Saipan, approximately 500 additional aircraft that would join the battle. Japanese forces, 9 carriers including Taiho, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Hio, Junyo, Ryuho, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho. Total aircraft, 430. 5 battleships, the massive Yamato and Musashi, each displacing 72,000 tons and mounting 18-inch guns, plus Kongo, Haruna, and Nagato. 13 heavy cruisers, 21 destroyers. The fleet was divided into 3 groups, with Shokaku in Force A, alongside Taiho and Zuikaku. American Task Force. 58. 15 carriers, including 7 large Essex-class fleet carriers and 8 light carriers. Total aircraft, 956. 7 fast battleships, including new Iowa-class ships, 21 cruisers, 69 destroyers, commanded by Admiral Raymond Spruance, with Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher directly commanding the carrier task force. The American fleet was organized into 4 carrier task groups, each a powerful force capable of independent operations. Japan's critical problem: inexperienced pilots. Veteran pilots had been killed at Coral Sea, Midway, Guadalcanal, and in the brutal campaign around Rabaul. The cream of Japanese naval aviation was gone. New pilots received only 2 to 4 months rushed training due to fuel shortages. Japan's oil situation was so desperate that training flights were severely restricted. Many pilots had fewer than 100 hours total flight time. Some had never made a carrier landing at night. Few had practiced coordinated attacks. American radar was superior, allowing early detection and vectoring of interceptors. F-6F Hellcat fighters outclassed the Zero in speed, firepower, and armor protection. For Shokaku, this was the last time the ship carried pilots with significant combat experience. Many pilots on the flight deck had only flown combat for a few months. The air group commander and squadron leaders were experienced, but most wingmen were fresh from training. This inexperience would prove fatal. Early morning, position 13 degrees north, 135 degrees east, Philippine Sea. Shokaku and other carriers proceeded eastward at 20 knots. The sea was calm, visibility unlimited. Perfect flying weather, but also perfect conditions for American radar operators. Target: American fleet supporting the landing at Saipan, about 300 nautical miles away. Japanese reconnaissance had located the American fleet at dawn, providing Ozawa with accurate targeting information. At 8:30, Shokaku launched 69 aircraft, a mix of Zero fighters, Val dive bombers, and some of the newer Judy dive bombers. This was part of 430 aircraft from the entire Japanese fleet attacking that morning in 4 separate waves. On the flight deck, young pilots, most with only 2 to 6 months training, boarded their planes. Some were visibly nervous. Deck crews wished them luck. Aircraft took off in waves, forming up overhead before heading east into the rising sun. The launch was smooth and professional. Shokaku's deck crews were among the best in the Japanese Navy. After 90 minutes, American radar detected Japanese aircraft from 150 nautical miles away. The Americans had been expecting this attack. Task Force 58 launched 450 F-6F Hellcat fighters. The Hellcats climbed to altitude, positioned by radio guidance from ships' combat information centers. American fighter directors had near-perfect information about enemy altitude, speed, and numbers. At 10:36, first contact. Hellcats intercepted Japanese aircraft at altitudes between 17,000 and 25,000 feet. What followed was a one-sided massacre that American pilots would remember as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Aircraft from Shokaku and other ships were shot down in droves. Inexperienced young pilots could not match veteran American pilots and superior Hellcat fighters. The Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, was now outclassed. The Hellcat was faster in a dive, could absorb tremendous punishment, and packed 650 caliber machine guns. Japanese pilots tried to use their traditional tactics, tight turns exploiting the Zero's maneuverability, but American pilots refused to dogfight. They used boom and zoom tactics, diving from altitude, firing, then climbing away using superior speed. Japanese pilots who broke through the fighter screen faced walls of anti-aircraft fire from American ships. New proximity-fused shells detonated near aircraft without requiring direct hits, devastating tight formations. The first wave lost 42 of 69 aircraft. Only 27 survived, and most of these were damaged. Not a single bomb or torpedo hit an American ship. Worse, some pilots radioed back, claiming they had sunk carriers. False reports that convinced Ozawa his attack was succeeding. Subsequent waves met similar fates. Within the next 30 minutes, the second wave of 128 aircraft was intercepted. 97 were shot down. Only 31 returned to their carriers, many so badly damaged they could not fly again. The third wave of 47 aircraft lost 40. Most never reached the American fleet. The final wave of 82 aircraft launched in early afternoon was completely scattered. Some pilots could not find the American fleet. Others ran out of fuel searching. 73 aircraft were lost. Summary: Japan lost over 330 aircraft on the first day. America lost 29 aircraft, mostly to accidents and anti-aircraft fire from their own ships. American pilots called this the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. One Hellcat pilot remarked it was like an old-time turkey shoot back home. For Japan, it was a catastrophe. 2 years of pilot training destroyed in a single day. Meanwhile, Shokaku remained safe, maneuvering in formation. The ship was preparing to recover surviving aircraft. Flight deck crews stood ready to service returning planes. No one aboard knew disaster was approaching beneath the waves. USS Cavalla, SS-244, a Gato-class submarine, had been silently tracking the Japanese fleet since early morning. Cavalla was on her first war patrol, having departed Pearl Harbor only weeks earlier. Commander Herman Kostler, her captain, was an experienced submarine officer determined to make his first patrol count. Throughout the morning, Cavalla had been following the Japanese fleet at periscope depth, reporting positions to Pearl Harbor. Kostler had watched Shokaku launch her morning strike. Now, the carrier was vulnerable, recovering aircraft. Around noon, Cavalla rose to periscope depth. Kostler observed through the periscope. Shokaku moving at 20 knots, position 12 degrees north, 137 degrees 25 minutes east, range 3,000 yards. The carrier was magnificent, over 800 feet long, displacing over 30,000 tons, her flight deck crowded with aircraft. 2 destroyer escorts patrolled around her, but they were focused on air threats, not submarines. The destroyers were screening ahead and to the sides, leaving gaps in coverage. Kostler made his decision instantly. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. 3 minutes later, Cavalla moved closer, running submerged at flank speed. Kostler constantly checked the periscope, watching the angle to target improve. The sonar operator called out bearing changes. The torpedo data computer calculated firing solutions. Shokaku was recovering returning aircraft, moving slowly and steadily, an ideal target. The carrier was turning into the wind to recover planes, making only about 15 knots. Her course was predictable. At 11:20, Cavalla, at 1,000 yards range, fired 6 Mark 14 torpedoes in sequence, all from forward tubes. Time between shots, 3 seconds. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, fire 4, fire 5, fire 6. The submarine shuddered with each launch as compressed air expelled the torpedoes. Kostler immediately ordered, "Take her down, all ahead flank." The diving officer flooded tanks, and Cavalla plunged toward 400 feet. Torpedoes raced toward Shokaku underwater at 46 knots, leaving thin wakes visible from Shokaku's bridge. 2 minutes later, 3 loud explosions echoed through the water. Cavalla's crew felt the concussions. Cheers erupted in the submarine. At least 3 torpedoes struck Shokaku's starboard side. Some sources record 4 hits. Through his headphones, Kostler could hear the sounds of rending metal and internal explosions. Some Japanese survivors later believed 4 torpedoes hit. Torpedo impact locations. First torpedo hit near the bow, penetrating just aft of the forward elevator, damaged auxiliary engine room number 1, and flooded several compartments. Second and third torpedoes hit amidships, penetrating hull below waterline near the waterline bulge, ruptured multiple aviation fuel tanks. These were the fatal hits. Possible fourth torpedo hit near stern, possibly causing flooding in after engine spaces. Initial damage assessment in first 40 minutes. Engine room number 1 completely flooded, crew evacuated. Ship lost 6 knots speed, reducing maximum speed from 34 to 28 knots. Aviation fuel tanks ruptured. Approximately 20,000 to 30,000 gallons of high-octane aviation gasoline began leaking into ship's spaces. Fire suppression system partially damaged. Some sprinklers and pumps offline. Electrical systems suffered damage. Several circuits failed, reducing pumping capacity. Ship began listing slightly to starboard, about 2 degrees initially. Meanwhile, Cavalla dove deep to evade destroyers. One destroyer, Urakazi, immediately charged toward Cavalla's position. The destroyer's sonar had detected the torpedo launches. Within minutes, Urakazi was overhead, dropping depth charges. 106 depth charges were dropped over the next 3 hours in a methodical, professional attack pattern. Cavalla twisted and turned at 400 feet, changing course frequently. The submarine's hull groaned under pressure. Light bulbs shattered. Cork insulation rained from overhead. But Cavalla's hull held. No major damage occurred. Kostler and his crew waited silently, sweating in the tropical heat. After 3 hours, the depth charging ceased. Cavalla had escaped. On Shokaku, Captain Matsubara Hiroshi immediately ordered damage control. The veteran captain had survived multiple battles. He knew Shokaku was tough. She had survived bomb hits before. Matsubara believed she could survive this. Damage control parties rushed to their stations. Work teams assembled with portable pumps, shoring materials, and firefighting equipment. Team 1 attempted pumping water from engine room number 1. They failed. The pumps were insufficient against the massive flooding. The space was abandoned. Team 2 tried to seal ruptured fuel tanks using collision mats and wooden plugs. They failed. The ruptures were too large, too numerous, and below the waterline. Fuel continued leaking at hundreds of gallons per minute. Team 3 attempted shutting down the ventilation system to contain fuel vapors. Too late. Fuel vapors had already spread throughout the ship through the ventilation ducts. Critical problem: Shokaku was designed with an open ventilation system to cool engine rooms and compartments in tropical conditions. This excellent feature for normal operations became fatal in this situation. Fuel vapors from ruptured tanks, lighter than air, rose and spread through the ventilation system to engine rooms 2 and 3, interior corridors, crew quarters, lower decks of flight deck, hangar deck. The ship became a floating bomb. Over the next 2 hours, fuel vapor concentration increased rapidly throughout the ship. Some sailors reported smelling gasoline everywhere. Some fainted from inhaling fumes. Others reported burning eyes and difficulty breathing. Temperature in engine rooms rose as ventilation failed. Matsubara considered abandon ship order, but still hoped to control the situation. Damage control teams worked desperately, knowing they were racing against time. If ignition occurred before they could ventilate the ship, the results would be catastrophic. Destroyers Urakaze and Wakatsuki moved closer to prepare rescue if needed. Light cruiser Yahagi also approached. Shokaku continued moving under her own power at reduced speed, but her list was increasing. She was down by the bow, taking water forward. 3 hours after torpedo hits, Around 1500 hours, an unknown ignition source triggered the fuel-vapor-air mixture that had accumulated throughout the ship. The exact ignition source remains uncertain. Possibilities include electrical spark from damaged wiring, hot metal in engine room machinery, static electricity, or a small fire that had been smoldering undetected. What is certain is that the concentration of fuel vapors had reached explosive levels. At 1500 hours precisely, first explosion occurred deep in the central compartment where fuel tanks were ruptured. The explosion was devastating. Blast pressure spread through connected spaces. Adjacent fuel tanks exploded in a chain reaction, each explosion triggering the next. The blast pressure was so intense it buckled interior bulkheads. The explosion shattered the flight deck from below, blowing wooden planking skyward. Fires immediately spread to the hangar deck, where aircraft were being serviced. Fuel and ammunition on these aircraft began cooking off. Fire spread to aircraft ammunition storage compartments. In the next 1 to 2 minutes, a second explosion chain occurred, far more powerful than the first. This was the catastrophic detonation. The aircraft bomb magazine located amidships detonated. Bombs of various sizes, from 60 kilogram to 800 kilogram weapons, exploded simultaneously. The entire central section of the flight deck was blown hundreds of feet into the air. A massive fireball erupted from the ship's center. Black smoke column rose hundreds of meters, visible for miles. The ship shook so violently that men on surrounding vessels felt the concussion. Shokaku's back was broken. Her hull began separating amidships. Matsubara, realizing the ship was doomed, immediately ordered abandon ship. The communication system was damaged. Orders were transmitted by voice, passed from man to man, from compartment to compartment. Abandon ship! All hands abandon ship! The order was clear. No time for formality. Over next 5 minutes, crew jumped overboard from ship's sides. Men slid down ropes. Some jumped from the flight deck, a drop of over 60 feet to the water. Others climbed down cargo nets. Flight deck crews threw life rafts and debris into the water to provide flotation. Destroyers Urikaze, Wakatsuki, and Hatsuzuki moved alongside, dangerously close to the sinking carrier. Light cruiser Yahagi also approached at full speed. Sailors on the destroyers threw lines to swimmers. Cargo nets were deployed. Small boats launched to recover men in the water. Shokaku began listing heavily to starboard. The list increased rapidly. 5 degrees, 10 degrees, 15 degrees. Seawater flooded damaged compartments. The flooding was uncontrolled. Ship listed 45 degrees. Men could no longer stand on the flight deck. They slid down toward the starboard side. Bow began plunging underwater. The forward section was completely submerged. The massive anchor chains rattled as they dragged through water. Then Shokaku capsized completely, rolling to starboard, bow sinking first. For a moment she hung suspended, almost vertical in the water. Her propellers and rudder emerged from the water, still slowly turning. Red bottom paint showed clearly. Men in the water could see the enormous size of her hull. Crew on destroyers watched the once mighty carrier slowly disappear. Some Japanese sailors sang the ship's song as she went down. Others simply watched in silence, tears streaming. At approximately 15:10, 3 hours and 50 minutes after torpedo hits, Shokaku's stern slipped beneath the surface. She sank completely at position 11 degrees, 50 minutes north, 137 degrees, 57 minutes east. Water depth at that location, approximately 5,400 meters, over 3 miles deep. Shokaku plunged into darkness, leaving only debris and swimmers on the surface. Total crew complement, 1,660 personnel. Killed in action, 1,272. including Captain Matsubara Hiroshi, who went down with his ship. Survivors, approximately 570, rescued by light cruiser Yahagi and destroyers Urakazi, Wakatsuki, and Hatsuzuki. Rescue operations continued for several hours. Many survivors suffered burns, injuries from explosions, or fuel ingestion. Some died later from their injuries. The Battle of the Philippine Sea lasted 2 days, June 19th to 20th, 1944. This was the greatest defeat of Japanese naval aviation in the war. The scale of the disaster cannot be overstated. Japan's carefully rebuilt carrier air groups, representing over a year of training and preparation, were destroyed in 2 days. Overall results: Japan lost 3 fleet carriers, Taiho, Shokaku, and Hyo. Taiho, the newest and most advanced Japanese carrier, sank earlier on June 19th from a single torpedo hit by submarine USS Albacore, followed by a gasoline vapor explosion similar to Shokaku's. Hyo was sunk on June 20th by aerial torpedo attack from American carrier aircraft. Japan lost over 600 aircraft. This included 346 carrier aircraft lost on June 19th alone, plus additional land-based aircraft from Guam, Tinian, and Saipan. Approximately 445 pilots killed, irreplaceable veteran aircrew and newly trained pilots alike. America lost 123 aircraft, mostly during night recovery operations on June 20th. 76 pilots killed. Many American losses occurred when aircraft ran out of fuel returning from long-range strikes. No American carriers sunk. No American capital ships damaged. For Shokaku, the sinking had special significance. This was one of 2 remaining carriers from the Pearl Harbor attack force still operational. Sister ship Zuikaku would sink 4 months later at Leyte Gulf in October 1944. With Shokaku's sinking, Japan's elite carrier force that had struck Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, was being systematically destroyed. Of the 6 carriers that attacked Pearl Harbor, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, 4 had been sunk at Midway, 1 now at Philippine Sea, with only Zuikaku remaining. Strategic significance was immense. Japan lost ability to defend Philippines and southern islands. The mobile fleet retreated to Japan, never again capable of offensive carrier operations. Supply lines from Southeast Asia to Japan were effectively severed. Without air cover, Japanese convoys became easy targets for American submarines. America captured Marianas, immediately beginning construction of massive airfields for B-29 bombers. By November 1944, B-29s would begin regular bombing raids against Japanese cities, including Tokyo. Japanese naval aviation lost effective combat capability after this battle. The few remaining carriers lacked aircraft and trained pilots to operate them effectively. Shokaku operated for 33 months from first sortie at Pearl Harbor in December 1941. During this remarkably active service, the ship logged over 18,000 flight hours in combat operations, participated in 7 major campaigns across the Pacific. She had sailed from Hawaii to the Indian Ocean, from the Coral Sea to the Solomon Islands. Her aircraft had struck targets from Darwin to Guadalcanal. The ship had been hit by bombs multiple times. At Coral Sea in May 1942, 3 1,000-pound bombs struck her flight deck, killing over 100 men and starting major fires. At Santa Cruz in October 1942, at least 3 more bombs hit, causing extensive damage. But each time Shokaku survived, returned to Japan, was repaired, and came back to fight. The crew proudly called Shokaku the lucky ship and believed she was unsinkable. But luck ran out on June 19, 1944. Not from bombs this time, but from torpedoes striking below the waterline where her armor protection was weakest. The wreck lies at 5,400 meters depth, coordinates 11 degrees 50 minutes north, 137 degrees 57 minutes east of the Mariana Islands in the Philippine Sea. At that depth, pressure is over 700 times atmospheric pressure. The wreck has never been found. Modern deep-sea exploration technology could potentially locate her, but the search area is vast and the depth extreme. Shokaku rests in eternal darkness on the ocean floor. August 1945, 14 months after Shokaku sank, Japan surrendered aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The war was over. Shokaku and sister ship Zuikaku are recorded as the last two remaining carriers from the Pearl Harbor attack force. Both sunk in 1944, Shokaku at Philippine Sea in June, Zuikaku at Leyte Gulf in October. Their loss marked the end of the glory days of Japanese naval aviation, the end of the Kido Butai that had dominated the Pacific in early 1942. With them died Japan's dreams of victory in the Pacific War.